Executive Mayor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mabine. Members of the Mayoral Committee here present, Region G Director, Mr. Mpho Phalatse, city and entity officials, residents of Johannesburg, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, the last few weeks have been some of the toughest for our residents and the leadership of the city of Johannesburg. Our arrival at this devastating point began on Monday, the 5th of December 2022, with torrential downpour that included larger than usual hailstones, which caused damage to property, stones which caused damage to property, fauna and flora, essential infrastructure, particularly roads, traffic lights, buildings, substations, power stations and pipelines. And tragically, it was on this day that 15 people tragically lost their lives during an alleged religious ceremony at the Jukskei River. As we stand today, the remains of a 3-month-old baby have still not been recovered. Subsequent days of rainfall have put pressure on already damaged infrastructure and continues to affect the lives and livelihoods of the residents of Johannesburg. The rain and the destruction it has caused and continues to cause activated the city's JOC, or Joint Operations Committee, at the JMPD's Integrated Intelligent Operations Center, or the IIOC. This is to ensure a coordinated response to the rapidly evolving and destructive emergency that the residents and the city continue to be subjected to. The JOC is made up of over 20 stakeholders from Joburg, the Gauteng provincial government, as well as the national government. Some of the stakeholders include, but are not limited to, the Office of the MMC for Public Safety, the Joburg Department of Human Settlements, the JMPD, the Joburg Emergency Management Services, Joburg Disaster Management Center, Joburg Department of Health and Social Development, Gauteng Provincial Disaster Management Center, including the Department of Cllr, or Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Joburg Group Risk and Assurance Services, SASSA, or the South African Social Security Agency, various NGOs, the Johannesburg Roads Agency, City Power and Eskom, to name but a few stakeholders. Members of the media, thus far, 23 people have been rescued by Joburg EMS, 148 people have been rescued by SAP's Search and Rescue, approximately 213 formal households have been damaged, 61 informal settlement dwellings have been damaged, and 16 people have tragically lost their lives, including off-duty SAPS member, Warrant Officer Ntsako Pataka. Once again, on behalf of the Joburg multi-party government, I wish to convey my condolences to the loved ones of those who've regrettably lost their lives as a result of the emergency caused by the inclement weather. Last week Friday, alongside MMCs, we paid our respects to bereaved families in Alexandra, and with the Department of Social Development that's providing counseling, burial services for those who can't afford to bury their loved ones, and other related social services. Residents of Johannesburg, due to the extent of the damage, particularly to City Power's network, I wrote to Eskom on Sunday, the 10th of December 2022, to request an exemption from load shedding, especially in regions C, D, E, and G, which has been most affected by the storms. By Monday, they had acknowledged receipt of my request, and on Thursday, the 15th of December 2022, a 3-day reprieve was granted to those areas. City Power will, together with Eskom, use their discretion to decide on the areas that may be under pressure with maintenance and repair backlogs. This is a significant move by Eskom, and it shows an understanding of the emergency that we find ourselves in, because maintenance and repairs, as well as the detection of faults, cannot be conducted on a network that is not live. City Power teams are now working tirelessly to clear a backlog of approximately 5,000 logged calls. Ladies and gentlemen, the current damage to infrastructure sits at approximately 300 million rands, and we expect this figure to increase as some areas are still underwater or inaccessible, therefore making it impossible to conduct an accurate and a final assessment. A breakdown of the figures currently is as follows. Joburg Water, 6.7 million rands. Joburg Roads Agency, 115 million rands. Joburg City Parks and Zoo, 15 million rands. City Power, 31 million rands. And Human Settlements, 98 million rands. These figures exclude a 10% provision for contingencies and VAT at 15% that are added to the total. Residents of Johannesburg, it is in this context that I signed off on a report from the city's Disaster Management Centre, which has been submitted to the provincial and national disaster management centres, stating our intention to declare a local state of disaster. Section 55(1) of the Disaster Management Act makes provision that in the event of a local disaster, the council of a municipality having primary responsibility for the coordination and management of the disaster may, by notice in the Provincial Gazette, declare a local state of disaster if existing legislation and contingency arrangements do not adequately provide for that municipality to deal effectively with the disaster, or other special circumstances warrant the declaration of a local state of disaster. Further to this, Section 23(1) of the Act states that when a disastrous event occurs or threatens to occur, the National Disaster Management Centre must, for the purpose of proper application of this Act, determine whether the event should be regarded as a disaster in terms of the Act, and if so, the National Disaster Management Centre must immediately assess the magnitude and severity of the disaster, and must classify the disaster as a local, provincial, or national disaster in accordance with subsections 4, 5, and 6, and must record the prescribed particulars concerning the disaster in the prescribed register. In short, in order to declare a local state of disaster, the city requires concurrence from the provincial and national spheres of government. We therefore trust that the detailed report submitted to the relevant authorities will accelerate the declaration of a local state of disaster. The declaration of a local state of disaster enables us, when necessary, to access resources from the provincial and national spheres of government and accelerate supply chain management processes. We do not want a repeat of a feverish scramble for contracts like we saw during the early COVID-19 years. Therefore, the city's group risk and assurance services will keep a focused eye on procurement. The multi-party government will not allow the corrupt to sacrifice lives and livelihoods for self-enrichment. Currently, the expenditure for the provision of emergency disaster relief materials is funded from the Incident Management Fund under Public Safety. This emergency will also require a review and adjustment of the 2022-23 budget. Residents of Joburg, on Wednesday morning, I arrived in Cape Town to meet with Mr. Colin Diner, the Chief Director of Disaster Management in the Western Cape. Mr. Diner has a wealth of local and global experience in dealing with disasters, and he runs a very impressive and permanent provincial disaster management centre. Having toured the facility and gained insight into best practice when dealing with a disaster, work is already underway to enter into a partnership with the Western Cape Provincial Government. In closing, when the multi-party government was elected to office, we were clear in stating that we cannot repair and rebuild Joburg without collaboration with other spheres of government, the private sector, or NGOs. We therefore want to thank NGOs and private sector players who have come on board to supplement the city's humanitarian work. I'm also encouraged by the work of councillors alongside our city and entity officials who've been working under mentally and physically strenuous conditions. They are the women and men who are at the coalface of service delivery. Thank you. A word of gratitude also extends to Joburg residents who have logged calls and have been patient as we work through backlogs, especially in the energy space. I must also commend the members of mayoral committee, all of whom have been working in and with communities in order to restore order and stabilize service delivery operations. Having conducted an inspection of Region E this weekend, I will lead a delegation of the executive to Regions C, D, and G in order to assess and assist with humanitarian and cleanup operations. Indeed, this is a dark time for the city, but we are determined to once again see the sun shine on our city as we work to repair and rebuild Joburg together. Galabocha, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Executive Mayor. Colleagues, you know the drill, state where you're from, who you are, and where your question is directed at. I'd like to get this through this as rapidly as possible so we can actually get to the work of assessing the damage around. Yes, Mr. Mpho.
Good morning, Mayor and the mayoral committee members. My name is Mpho from ANC. So my first is just a clarity question. Are you actually calling for a state of disaster? Is this something in the pipeline, or you just made recommendations and submissions to the team, hoping to hear how they're going to respond to this, and how important is it for the city? We know that there's a lot of infrastructure damage. There's a lot that has to be fixed for this for the state of disaster rather to be declared. Then secondly, in terms of some of the areas that you visited on Monday, the MMC for Human Settlement was here. One of the areas here in Protea, they found that the developer or the development didn't have any stormwater drainage. And also the issue of stormwater drainage is another issue that has been cited for the localized flooding that we see in Johannesburg. Are you going to be probing that particular incident, what happened in that development, and are there going to be measures that you're going to be taking? Because we went to the residents there, and they are saying that every time there's a flood, they are affected. Every time there's a flood, they have to move, and they simply want to be moved from the place. Is this something that you will be looking into? Are there going to be legal action that's going to be taken? And just generally on stormwater drainage issues, how are you going to address this?
I think I'm going to feedback on some of the questions that were asked by my colleague. Because you find that people are building where they are not supposed to build. I mean, what can happen in that regard? Are you going to remove them? And obviously, to remove them, you must find alternative accommodation for them. How are you going to deal with that? You've written to provincial and national asking for, a local disaster declaration. How soon, in terms of the law, can you expect to see this happening? We know that there are some people who were displaced by the floods. What is their condition at the moment? How many people are displaced? Where exactly are they currently being housed?
We'll deal with that note and then we'll come for another note when you're ready.
Thank you very much for those questions. Yes, indeed, we are, as stated, we do need concurrence from provincial and national government in order for a local state of disaster to be declared. And we have written to both spheres of government, hoping for such concurrence so we can declare local state of disaster. It's very important that this happens. As I've stated, we've costed the whole exercise and what it would take for us to repair the damage. And it's now sitting at 300 million rands, and I've stated that there are areas that are still submerged, so this amount is likely to even increase. Now, if you look at the city's finances currently, you look at our infrastructure backlog that we've inherited, we're going to require resources, additional resources outside of our existing budget to be able to deal effectively with the damage, and that's why this declaration is important. It will unlock resources, and it will also unlock coordination and assistance from all spheres of government, as we will require assistance. I've also written to the Minister of Home Affairs in the last week. We are dealing with, and I'll also deal with the question on people who are being relocated and the need for emergency accommodation. We've got a huge demand for emergency accommodation. Much bigger than what we can handle as the city. But what the Department of Human Settlements in the city is also finding is that a lot of them are undocumented migrants, and it's for that reason that I've written to the Minister of Home Affairs requesting their partnership and collaboration in assisting us to deal with this. We're going to need immigration on board. to assist us as we relocate people. We are currently relocating people in their numbers, and that work continues. I hope to hear back from the Minister soon as to how they're going to be supporting us. But the declaration of a state of disaster will certainly assist a lot in creating an organized environment in which we all work across all tiers of government, as all the resources required sit in different spheres of government. It's very important that this happens. Again, I need to re-emphasize, we've inherited a massive infrastructure backlog. We've spoken about it, about 300 billion rands infrastructure backlog that we've inherited. We are already vulnerable as a city. Now with these changes in weather patterns against that backdrop, we really need all the help that we can get. And I also spoke to the need for us to establish a permanent disaster management center, and that work is already underway, and we will be getting guidance from the Western Cape Provincial Government, who are running a very good disaster management center. The issue of stormwater drainage systems, it's a big problem, and it is a citywide problem. It contributes to the infrastructure backlog that we are talking about. But when we talk about stormwater drains, there's also other issues. Illegal dumping is a problem. You know, we found instances where illegal dumping leads to blockages of stormwater drains, and they no longer function as they should. In one of the engagements, one of the meetings that I held with the MMCs this past week and key city officials, this was identified as an area that requires urgent intervention. The MMC for Public Safety will work very closely with Joburg Water and other relevant stakeholders in the city to combat illegal dumping. But that is just one of the causes. We do have infrastructure challenges that must be dealt with, and they require resources beyond what we can handle in just one financial year. We don't have 300 billion rands in our capital budget, and so we're looking at creative ways to start addressing some of these backlogs, and that work is underway. Will there be investigations? Will people be held to account? That work continues on an ongoing basis through our Group Forensic and Investigation Services Unit, as and when we find that the city and our ratepayers in particular have paid for work that was not done properly. We do submit such cases to GFIS. They do get investigated, and where possible, we even recover some of the monies that have been spent. In terms of people building where they're not meant to, yes, unfortunately, we're now at a point where we're going to have to demolish structures. We're going to have to do it to save lives. We often warn people when they invade land where they're not supposed to. There's a reason the city has a development planning department. There's a reason why we have zoning of certain areas, of all the areas in the city, stating exactly what kind of development can happen in those areas. And if people choose to ignore this and choose to place themselves and even their loved ones, including children, innocent children, at risk, then at some point as a city we do need to intervene. We have identified several areas that will require such demolition, and that work will continue. It will be led primarily by public safety and development planning. In terms of people who are displaced, I believe that I did state all the numbers in the statement, and we're happy to share the statement with you so you get those numbers. Thank you.
Last takers. Yes.
Good morning, Mayor and MMCs. Mayor, I know it's not your fault because you only came into government in 2021. You know, for the past 12 years, Mosquito Valley in Extension 1 Indonesia has been suffering from flooding every single time it rains. Homes have been flooded non-stop. Nelson from City Power and the City Power team have been brilliantly working in that area. Is there a way for you, as you know, the mayor and the MMCs to actually assist to get this sorted out? Because the community are really frustrated, and the exact words was that the government is not helping us. We've been crying to the government for years now, and the flooding is not stopping. We know environmental needs to get involved as well, because there's reeds and stuff that that you can't just cut. It's an environmental issue. So we can't blame Michael's son either, but he has to come in with the rest of the team, strong ministers to balance, to come in and actually assist. Is there a way that we can actually get this sorted out so that homes don't get flooded, because there's elderly staying there? A lot of elderly, not just 1, 2, but also young kids that are also living there currently.
Just the last one. Just asking Mayor, I mean, with the inclement weather and climate change, I mean, it's obvious now with the disasters that we've seen. Are you worried as a city going forward? And what are your plans to try and mitigate this? I'm asking this in the background of Cllr as well, where we saw flooding that's happening. It's a reality, climate change is real, and we're seeing it in terms of our weather patterns. So how prepared is the city to deal with these issues going forward?
Over to you.
Thank you so much. There are several areas in the city that experience recurrent floods for various reasons. Some of the reasons, unfortunately, is that people invaded land they were not supposed to. They occupied it and they established themselves there. In some of those instances, we have tried to engage those communities to consider relocating people from those areas. There's often resistance. And where there's resistance, we do try and look at alternative interventions. And unfortunately, many of them cost money, and I've already alluded to the infrastructure backlog that we are dealing with. There's many reasons for flooding in various parts of the city. And so it's a complex, multifactorial challenge. I think the important thing is for us to have a good idea of where all these areas are and a good estimate of what it would take to resolve the issues. But where people need to be relocated, I'd really like to appeal that they also work with the city and that we don't create unnecessary problems and that they allow such processes to happen. Human Settlement is able to assist communities with relocation. We are doing it where it is allowed. And where we're not opting for relocation, then it's a question of finding the money and seeing how we resolve those challenges. We will do an inspection, and we will go and have a look and see as to what it is that can be done in the area that you alluded to. But where there is a will, there's a way. And, we must just be intent on resolving all these issues, but residents must also come to the party. Sometimes we need them to also allow us as government to assist them. Are we worried? Yes, I am. I'm very worried. It's precisely for that reason that I visited the Disaster Management Centre in the Western Cape, because I realized as the city of Johannesburg, we're very reactive. We pull together a jock as and when there's an incident. But you've got in the Western Cape a situation where you've got a permanent disaster management centre, and what that does is you're able to then build into it the systems and processes that you require to even predict disaster before it comes. So on Wednesday morning when I was there, they were already able to show me that on Friday and Saturday they're expecting heavy rains, and plans were already underway to mitigate whatever disaster could unfold from that. And that's the level at which as a city we should be functioning. The good news is that they're quite happy to assist us. So we will be formalizing the partnership. In fact, that work has already started. And we've also identified a resource that's worked there for many years that's now in the city of Johannesburg. So we're identifying key champions that we can pull together to drive this work. So hopefully quite soon we will have established that. The good news is also we've got resources in the city. The only thing that was lacking was coordination and just a permanent structure where we're able to invest and ensure that on an ongoing basis we're always ready for disasters. So hopefully in the near future we will tell a good story of how this work has unfolded, and we will be able to not only address disasters as they happen but also predict disasters before they happen and have planned responses and mitigations.
Thank you, Executive Mayor. Thank you.